So it turns out that more Commander Legends cards have been spoiled as a result of that whole packs making their way out of the facility situation. So, my friends, let us talk about some new cards. Get ready for the Hype Storm! Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to talk about brand new cards that are coming in Commander Legends. Now, a couple of notes. All the spoilers we're going to look at are all coming from booster packs that are in German. And on top of that, they all just kind of have pictures taken with cell phones. So we're not looking at like really high resolution or English versions of the cards. So what we're going to do is we're just going to stick to the interesting like pop out legendary guys and stuff. I'm not going to go over everything from the spoilers. I'm not going to go over the reprints and everything else. We're just going to talk about the goodness. And actually, speaking of the goodness on a completely unrelated note, Habanero, if you are watching this, you were correct. I have actually lost weight. I lost like 10 pounds, buddy. Couldn't tell, but checked it out, and that's the truth. Anyways, most people probably don't care about that, so let's take a look at Malcolm. Malcolm is the first legendary creature that we're going to look at today. I'm not sure if everything we're going to look at is a legendary creature, but I know the majority is. Surprise, considering it's Commander Legends. So, here we have Malcolm, Keen-Eyed Navigator. So, he has flying, he is a 2/2, and whenever one or more pirates you control deal combat damage to an opponent, you create a treasure token. This triggers for each opponent that takes combat damage, not just one per combat. And this creature has partner. So that's interesting. Bear in mind that, again, these are German, so the translation may be slightly off. But it's interesting to note that it's specified, because this is Commander, and I guess depending on the rules set you're playing with, you can split attacks. I don't actually know how that works with Commander now that I think about it. I remember how we used to do it in multiplayer Magic was we would decide at the very outset of the game, the very beginning of the game, we would decide, can you split attack and can you cross block? And cross blocking is basically like, you're attacking this guy. I'm not involved in the attack, but I can send my guy in to defend for the defender if I so choose. So I don't actually know how the Commander rules work specifically that way, as I do not play the Commander format, but it's interesting to note that, I mean, from this, it makes it seem like the standard issue rule is you can literally swing with people in all kinds of different directions, which I like. That makes an even more chaotic and nutty environment. But the fact that this will trigger for each opponent as opposed to just, you know, there's certain cards that say for each creature that does this, like when you attack, for each creature that does this, you get to draw a card or whatever. And then there's cards that say when one or more do X, so you only get one copy of the trigger instead of a bunch. So I do like that. I also like the fact that this is another one of the Siren Pirates from Ixalan. I thought this was a really funky concept because traditionally in most fantasy, at least in the last 100 years or so, sirens are almost exclusively women. They tend to be beautiful women. It tends to be beautiful women with incredible voices. So they can sing in a way that just enchants your soul, right? So they'll just kind of like hang out by the waterside trying to lure sailors into smashing up their boats and stuff like that. The idea of first of all, it being a dude is cool. Secondly, making it into like a flying harpy style beast is also a really interesting choice. And what I didn't realize before I did that video forever ago, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but I used to sometimes include like actual real world historic information in some videos. And there used to originally be like male winged sirens, right? So it's just them using a concept that already existed. But either way, I've always dug the concept of like taking something that is a normalized trope and making an interesting twist on it. And for me, the flying dude sirens of Ixalan fall into that category, you know? It's a different way of doing things. So that covers the first card. They're on a weird website. So the next card we're going to look at here is called Anara Wolfid Familiar. And oh my God, I love this card so very much. 1 green and 3 for a 4/4 legendary wolf. And his ability is, during your turn, commander creatures you control have indestructible. And it's funny, if I didn't know what partner was, I'd be like, wait, commander creatures you control? But you can actually get your opponent's commanders now too. Bear in mind that we have that new Tevish Zod who lets you steal your opponent's commanders. So you can use this in conjunction with him, considering that they are both partners, if I'm not mistaken, right? So this is a very cool concept for a partner legend. Now, if you watched yesterday's video, you will remember me talking about how they were making a cycle of 5 familiars at uncommon. This is one of those, right? Because they were all going to have partners. So as far as I understand, this is like a wolf familiar. And I love the artwork. I really wish that we had higher res versions of the artwork so we could really appreciate all the details that are going on here. But this wolf with this kind of stag crown seated on his head with his crazy antlers and everything, it really stands out. And I love the fact that in German specifically, if you look at the type line where it says the creature type, it says wolf, bestie. That probably means beast, but it's just like bestie, like he's your best friend, and it makes perfect sense because he's a defensive partner. I love that tiny little bit of extra flavor that you get as a result. And the idea of a commander that pretty much solely exists to protect your other commander and himself at the same time is a very interesting concept. I don't think there are any commanders that do that. You can correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know every legendary creature that people use in Commander, especially ones that come from Commander decks. I would say those are the ones that I'm least familiar with, unless they already happened to be in my queue. But either way, Anara is really cool and definitely doesn't feel overpowered. But the next card we're going to talk about feels really strong. And that is Sakashima's protege. So, if you don't know who Sakashima is, Sakashima was the imposter in the world of Kamigawa, who could basically be anyone but had forgotten their own identity kind of thing. It's a funky, cool concept of a shapeshifter who can be anybody but has lost their own identity. That's an amazing concept. So, Sakashima's protege is a 3/1 creature that costs, it looks like 2 blue and 2, but I'm going to be honest, the glare that's on there, like on the image, makes it impossible for me to fully pull that off, but I think it costs 4. Maybe more, because this is it feels like a strong effect. Basically, it's got Flash and Cascade, okay? So it might actually end up costing something like 6 mana or more, let's be real. Like, I legit can't make it out. But anyways, I think it might be 6. So it's got Flash and Cascade, so you can cast this during your opponent's turn. When you cast it, you're going to get to flip over spells from the top of your deck until you find one that costs less than Sakashima and play it for free. And then on top of that, when Sakashima's protege comes into play, you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any permanent that entered the battlefield this turn. When I first read this card, I'm going to be real, I didn't even see the Flash or the Cascade. I thought this was maybe like a 3-drop or something like that, where it's like, oh, you can copy something else you've put out. Well, that seems okay, because you're going to have to spend a bunch of mana in the first place to cast something cool that you can copy, and then you cast this and copy one of your coolest things, right? So that's pretty cool. But then when you add in the fact that you can flash it out, which means you can play it on anybody's turn, which means you can make a copy of any of their best permanents. Doesn't matter what it is. You put out something amazing, me too. On top of that, I got to Cascade into a spell as well. And the fact is, you can just use this as a 3/1 beat stick if you don't want to copy with it. This seems like a really potent card, in all honesty. And the more I think about it, the more I feel like this thing has to cost at least 6 mana. You know what I mean? Could be wrong about that, but it seems I think this is actually the strongest card we're going to talk about today. I don't think there's anything else that's quite as powerful as that. Now, let's move on to a card that theoretically could be, because I don't know Commander and how bonkers it gets, Nightshade Harvester. This card seems like it's going to be bonkers in Commander, but I guess that's weighed out by the fact that everything's bonkers in Commander, so people have tons of answers and board wipes and stuff, so stuff is hitting the board and going left, right, and center, so even like strong cards don't stand that much of a chance if they don't have like protection built in. So the Nightshade Harvester is 1 black and 3 for a 2/2 is it an elf? It's an elf, maybe a shaman, it looks like. But anyways, it's an elf 2/2. When a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, that player loses a life, and you put a +1/+1 counter on the Nightshade Harvester. In a multiplayer game, where every time around the board, your opponents could be laying 3 or more lands, like, you put this out, and by the time you go around the board, it's already a 5/5. I mean, if it was like second turn off a Sol Ring or something like that, you're going to be getting so many land drops. And not only is your dude growing, but your opponents are being punished per land as well. Admittedly, you do have more life in Commander, so it's not as big a deal, but still, either way, it's an interesting, like, anti-landfall card. And overall, it seems like a funky design. Maybe I'm like overhyping it in my head, but it seems really, really strong. Like, it could just grow into a gigantic beast. But maybe the amount of time that it takes for it to grow into that beast is part of the issue that makes it not that strong. The artwork's all right. You know what I mean? You got her like, oh, sticking her spear down, I guess, into, how dare you connect to a forest? I don't know. I'm not sure what the flavor connection is supposed to be. I'll be real. All right, and then we have the final card we have to talk about here is called Blim. And Blim is 1 red, 1 black, and 2 for a 4/3 flyer with an incredibly interesting ability. Whenever Blim deals combat damage to a player, that player gains control of a permanent you control of your choice. So every time you hit with Blim, you're going to give your opponent one of your permanents. Now, obviously, there's certain permanents you can give them where it's just going to be a bad time, like Treacherous Blessing, for example. Look, I drew 3 cards. Here, you can have it. Now whenever you cast a spell, you take a damage, and I don't have to worry about this stupid enchantment anymore. So you can give your opponent garbage permanents that, like, punish you. They reward you to begin with, but then punish you. You can just go, I'll take the reward. You can have the punishment. That's great. Now, it takes it a step further, though, because in all honesty, if it was just that, you might go, you know what? I don't like this. Like, I'm going to pay 4 mana for a 4/3 flyer, hit my opponent, and I have to give them a permanent? That's way too, like, build specifically around me, although Commander is that. But the rest of the ability makes this more attractive. And so after you've given your opponent one of your permanents, then each player loses life and discards cards equal to the number of permanents they control but don't own. Now again, remember, these are German translations, so this might be slightly off. Take the spoilers that I've given you with a grain of salt in that regard, because it may turn out they're not quite as amazing as initially thought. I can't say for certain, but this all seems plausible. These all seem like, I mean, at the end of the day, we have the cards. We're looking at the cards. It's just a matter of getting an accurate translation. But with Blim, which is a hilarious name, by the way, it's really funky that, like, just the first time you hit your opponent with it, it's like, I'm going to hit you. Here, take this permanent. Now you lose a life and discard a card. And let's say you swing Blim at somebody else the next turn. Here, have one of my permanents. Now both of you discard a card, lose a life. You know, or if you hit the same guy, it's like, now discard 2 cards and lose 2 life. So you can just sit there and make it progressively worse for your opponent. Plus, in the colors that this exists in, red has a lot of, like, here you go, have my card, buddy. Enjoy it. It's yours now. So there's tons of ways to end up with your cards on your opponent's side, aside from Blim just handing it over. So to me, honestly, Blim seems like a really, really cool build around me commander, right? Like, I don't know if there's another commander that's better for this, like, permanent swap sort of thing. You know, who is it? Is it Zedru? I don't know. I'm just gonna mention names that are the wrong ones anyways. Regardless, I feel like there isn't anybody who does what Blim does. I feel like it's very interesting and unique and a really cool card to build around. I'll be honest, while I'm not a fan of playing, like, games of Magic with 3 or more people, recently I have been feeling a stronger pull towards Commander, because aside from that, like, larger group multiplayer aspect, I find it to be a really creative and engaging format. You know what I mean? Like, not when people are just playing to build the strongest things imaginable. Like, if you're just trying to build the most broken deck imaginable, that's like every format. Commander feels like the only format really where you can have more of an expression of a deck's personality. It's personality versus power is what it feels like. And yes, there are people who delve into the power aspect of it. But when it comes down to the personality aspect of it, I actually find that really, really appealing. And I may start to fiddle around with building some commander decks now that I've changed the way that I'm handling my cube construction. So that's something to consider. Either way, at this point, I've definitely spoken about all of the spoiler cards. So let me know what you think. If you like what I'm doing, like, comment, subscribe. That's all fantastic for the channel. If you love what I'm doing and want to support me further, then hop on my Patreon. I absolutely love when that happens. And other than that, thanks for coming by, my friends. I'm going to leave a link up here to the newest lore video from my Magic Lore channel. If you haven't checked it out, enjoy that. And other than that, I am gone for now. A goodbye, my friends.